Hello everyone, Lunar Warfare. Welcome to the prediction episode for the Metamorph in 3.9 Challenge League. As 3.9 is not just a simple Challenge League, the Chaos reports will likely be a bit longer, due to the necessity to explain the new mechanics such as the new Atlas in depth. I hope you'll enjoy the videos regardless, and as always, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, while still giving the most condensed information possible. There will likely not be a text release for the prediction episodes, simply due to time constraints. Further episodes will have their text release as per usual, a few days after the video release. I sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. As always, you can also find the timestamps to each section in the pinned comment down below, so make sure to check that out. Do keep in mind that these are educated guesses or predictions, and as such they might not be entirely accurate. Furthermore, I might miss a thing or two that seem obvious to many, and for that I apologize. It's hard to cover literally everything. If I do miss something you think is important, leave it in the comments down below. And what that means, of course, is invest at your own risk. With the usual disclaimer out of the way, let's jump right in. The first segment breaks down currencies and commodities, which there'll be a lot of during this league due to the newly added fragment and map types. I'll be giving a quick overview of the most important currencies during the first week of the Metamorph release, and what to do with them if you get them dropped early. First up, Exalted Orbs. And yes, that's a plural form, as there are now 5 different kinds of Exalted Orbs. As it is impossible to say how the new Exalted Orbs will impact the overall economy without seeing the actual drop rate in use cases, I'll be focusing on the original Exalted Orb for today and giving a rough prognosis for the upcoming Exalted Orbs instead of a full analysis. The analysis of the newer orbs will be coming in next week's episode. To give a quick overview for the uninitiated, there are going to be 4 new types of Exalted Orb, 1 for each new boss in the Atlas of Worlds. They are called Hunters, Crusaders, Warlords, and Redeemers Exalted Orbs. They function in exactly the same way as the original Exalted Orb, except for the fact that their additional modifier is limited to a specific pool, corresponding to their names. Each of these Exalted Orbs will be adding 1 mod of that specific influence type to the chosen rare item. As a result, they are somewhat more and somewhat less powerful or useful than the normal Exalted Orb. This is the reason that I cannot provide a precise prognosis, as we aren't aware of the actual influence mods available, and as such, their exact value is not able to be determined. Overall, I would imagine these to be pretty popular, however, simply due to the fact that they function as more specific Exalted Orbs. Whether or not all of them will be valuable, we will have to wait and see in the next week's episode. I'd recommend that if you do get one early, just hold on to them for a few days, or a week even, to wait for people to figure out their actual worth and let the economy balance around them. As for the original Exalted Orb, it has seen its highest price ever in the last league. It has also seen its fastest rise to extreme prices ever recorded. There was a multitude of reasons for this enormous price that have all been diminished by the announced changes already, so it is unlikely, especially with the addition of 4 new alternative orbs, that the Exalted Orbs will be reaching these prices, and with that speed, in Metamorph. The heavy nerf to the multi-mod craft will drastically reduce the worth of Exalted Orbs, as that was the number one thing that people used Exalted Orbs for since the Betrayal League introduced it to the masses. Furthermore, the Zana mod this league seem incredibly potent, which will provide a nice chaos sink, which did not really exist in the same way last league. As a result, I would be expecting the Exalted Orbs to rise at a rather quick pace, but not reach the early league heights that we've seen in Blight, nor the mid to late league peaks that we've seen either. This prognosis might change over the course of the first week, depending on whether or not the new Exalted Orbs are worthy of consideration as an alternative. My usual recommendation for an early league Exalted Orb drop is as follows. Keep it for the first 3 to 7 days to wait for the prices to somewhat stabilize or get into a range where you're able to properly convert it into enough equipment to make back the potential loss of conversion. In Blight, just for reference, the first small plateau was reached after exactly 7 days and lasted for about 3 to 4 days. This is the perfect time to invest your saved up Exalted Orbs into gear. Do not convert Exalted Orbs to Chaos early unless you are 100% certain that you will be able to make more Chaos as a direct result of spending the Exalt. Then the passive Exalted Orb price rise would have given you otherwise. One last tip. For the entire first 2 to 3 weeks, I would heavily recommend checking the Exalted Orb prices on an hourly or daily basis, as a once weekly report like this will not properly keep you up to date, as much as I love this series. Alteration Orbs will likely see a similarly diminished value in Metamorph compared to Blight due to the multi-mod changes. It will still be used for crafting item bases and will not go back to being absolutely worthless, especially with the new influence types being added. They'll retain a decent percentage of the value from last league. Early on, they usually take a few days to pick up steam, once people get enough currency and get high enough eye-level bases that you would want for these crafts to begin with. As a result, if you are intending to craft with alteration orbs, it's always been a good idea to stock up on alteration orbs during the first week, as you'll be able to easily buy hundreds or thousands more than you will be able to later on. For example, during Legion, it took 3 to 6 days to reach its first price plateau at 1 to 10. As such, if you're buying them earlier, you'll be able to acquire 2 to 3 times as many alteration orbs than later on in the league when more people are trying to get their crafts done. For sellers, this, of course, means that you should hold on to them, for about a week at least, to get the most value out of each individual alteration orb. Another important factor for this league will be that Abyss is no longer a Xanomod, making high eye level, so 82 and 83 plus, eye jewels extremely worthwhile to craft, especially the searching eye ones due to the high likelihood of the bow-focused meta. As such, my final recommendation would be to either buy up a ton of them early on, or if you intend to craft or simply hold onto your own to craft eye jewels later on in the league. This is going to maximize your potential profit with them, and I would advise against selling them just like that, especially during the first week, as mentioned previously. If the alteration orbs reach a certain threshold of usually around 6 or 5 to 1, it is absolutely recommended to lighten your jewelry restrictions on the loot filter in order to pick up additional alteration orbs per map. So keep an eye on the early prices for these, as the next update from the Chaos Report will only be coming in about a week. With the return of the Nemesis Xanomod for the second time in a row, we'll have to cover the Ancient Orbs as well. Last league, they reached some pretty nasty prices of 60 Chaos plus, and held a rather respectable price of 50 Chaos plus throughout the entire league. With the removal of the Harbinger Xanomod, however, it is likely that the supply for these will be drastically diminished, as the only way to obtain them now is by sheer luck, the Sexton mod for Harbingers, or the Harbinger Scarab, which will very likely be super expensive during the league as a result. Ancient Orbs are pretty much only used to try and chance a Headhunter unique belt. As it's the most expensive unique item in the game, the Ancient Orbs will adjust their prices towards it. This will mean that any other uses for the Ancient Orb are highly unfavorable from an economic perspective for the players, as most uniques don't even get up to the price of a singular Ancient Orb, even when their prices are adjusted towards the Headhunter especially. One potential break from previous conventions for this league is that the league mechanic in the new expansion is focused on boss killing, which is something the Headhunter is not great for. However, it will still see a ton of popularity as the Xanamods of Nemesis and Beyond are back, which are the best Xanamods for the Headhunter clearing in maps. Additionally, the belt slot for bow users is oftentimes, easy to give up for this belt during normal mapping, and we'll likely be seeing a large amount of bow using players throughout the league. As such, I predict that the Headhunter will remain to be one of the very popular item choices, despite the heavy boss focus of the league. We're likely going to see similar prices for the Ancient Orbs to last league as a result, if not potentially higher, due to the removal of easy access to the Harbingers during mapping, and thus the supply. My advice for these early on will mirror the previous advice for Exalted Orbs. Wait a few days for them to gain steam, and people to start chancing the Headhunter. The prices will rise in correspondence to the Headhunter prices, and as a result, will be higher the league goes on. I would personally advise against using them yourself, as the statistical likelihood to get a Headhunter from any individual orb is extremely low, and the 50 to 60 chaos that you will most likely be able to gain from each orb will be a very welcome influx of currency for most players. One last tip, with the Headhunter chancing requiring an insane amount of Ancient Orbs, players are always willing to pay an additional up price for convenience. So save up at least 3 to 4 Ancient Orbs before you sell them, as this will allow you to ask for an extra 5 to 10 Chaos Orbs per orb, and you will still sell them pretty much instantaneously. For the commodity section, we'll be covering the different fragment pieces, the new Awakened Orb, as well as the new synthesis maps in the upcoming weeks. If there is something you would like to see on the commodity section that I haven't mentioned just now, please make sure to let me know in the comments. With those currencies and the commodities skipped, let's move on to our unique item watchlist and the predictions for it. Unlike last league, I'll be focusing more on the first week candidates instead of trying to predict what the items will be worthwhile throughout the entire league. As a result, please keep in mind that some of these, or a lot of these, might lose their value quite fast after the first week. This list is more of a recommended farming list, so to speak, to get people started in the economy for this particular beast. The watchlist will be reworked once the meta has calmed down a bit, into something you're more used to. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this approach. I'm trying to diversify the Chaos Report a little bit and make it more timing appropriate if I can. The first item on our list will be the Hiri's Aya Unique Body Armor. This chest piece has always been an extremely popular choice for bow builds, as it represents the single largest flat damage increase of any body armor in the game, and it also synergizes extremely well with the Raider Ascendancy, as well as the Phase Acrobatics and Acrobatics Keystone nodes, which are taken by nearly all bow builds in the game. With the league having such a heavy focus on boss killing, as well as a high probability for a large amount of bow users, this chest piece, despite its nerfs, will most likely be a highly contested item among the player base. In the previous league, the Aya has seen a top price of about 500 chaos, but in the first 1 to 3 weeks, which is what we'll be focusing on for this watch list, its top price was at 237 chaos for about 1.5 weeks into the league. The prices are likely going to be vastly increased from last league, simply due to a higher demand for it, and I'd also be surprised if the price drop that happened last league at about 2 to 3 weeks in would happen again this time. The biggest problem with this chest piece, there is no way to properly target farm it, especially with the way that the new Atlas functions. As a result, if you intend to pick this one up, make sure to get it early, as it is unlikely that the prices will stabilize or drop anytime early. The second item on the list will be the Rigwald's Quills. Much like the Hiri's Aya, this is one of the staple items for bow users across all leagues and skill levels, and is also one of the items I recommended to farm last league via the Dark Forest and Lair maps. With the removal of target farming on the Atlas, it will be quite a lot harder to even get close to the supply of this item that we've seen in previous leagues. Usually the Rigwald's Quills would have a rapid rise, and after about 4 to 5 days would see their peak for the entire league, simply due to the fact that more and more players would be able to access the single map farmability of the Atlas to target farm this particular item. With that possibility being removed, as well as the increased demand for it due to more players playing those kind of builds, it is prognosed that this item will not see the same drastic drop due to an oversupply, but rather sustain its high prices from the early days of the league start for a longer time, potentially even rising as the league progresses. If you intend to try and target farm this item, your best bet are the Dark Forest and Lair maps still. You can either buy these in bulk from other players, or decide to farm a specific sector after upgrading it to the highest level, in order to maximize the potential drop rates for the specific map you're aiming for. The sectors of the Atlas you're looking for, these two maps, are sectors 3 and 4. I would personally recommend sector 3 out of these two, as it also features the Tower and Toxic Sewer maps, which are always fan favorites. Sector 4 overall features a slightly better spread of maps, but only really has one amazing map, that being Lair, of course. As such, you are free to choose between these two sectors based on the information given here. Following that, I have the Spore Guard for you guys. The Spore Guard is the new chest piece added in the Blight League, and with it going core, we'll be able to obtain the Spore Guard as well. This chest piece is incredibly powerful, and it not only provides very good overall stats, but it is also an anointable item, meaning that it will give you additional flexibility in choosing your keystone passives. The innate effects of the Spore Guard itself are already very powerful, providing a decent chunk of additional damage, as long as you're standing still, which is something that pretty much every build does while they're attacking. And it also provides a nice layer of defensive utility to the wearer as well. All of these attributes combined with this chest piece into a very solid option that I personally have taken advantage of in 2 of my builds last league, and I'm a huge fan. The way to acquire this chest piece is exclusively through blighted maps that you will now be able to obtain through a 10% chance to spawn a blight encounter in any given map, similar to how Vault side areas, breaches, legion, and other similar mechanics work. The blight encounter will guarantee at least 1 oil or 1 blighted map every single time, meaning that the Spore Guard should not be incredibly rare, but still rare enough where potential target farming by buying up the blighted maps might become a real possibility from an economical perspective. I would definitely recommend keeping an eye on this, as it's a very solid option for a lot of builds, maybe yours as well. Next up, the double-socketed Tomb Fists. I won't be explaining the entire thought process behind this one, as it should be fairly obvious. Any and all attack builds love this glove, simply because it gives free Intimidate and has one of the most flexible stat spreads in the entire game, thanks to the 2 Abyss sockets it provides. The double-socketed Tomb Fists are going to be incredibly expensive, as we have lost the ability to semi-target farm them by using the Zana mod, as the Abyss mod does not exist this league. As such, the only way to obtain it is by getting incredibly lucky in high tier maps, to get the 10% chance of Abysses, then get the chance to fight a Lich, then have the Lich drop the right item with the right socket number. As a result, I highly recommend focusing this item early on, while it's still comparatively cheap, as one of the first big buys. The prices will gradually increase for this glove, probably throughout the entire league. One last addendum, it will also be very viable to farm Abyss Sextants, simply due to the off chance to get the Lich, so for this league, don't override them if you've done so previously. One of the most important items in this league will likely be the Void Fletcher unique quiver. This item has often seen varying amounts of popularity throughout the previous leagues and was used in builds such as the Ice Shot Void Fletcher Deadeye. The item itself has seen no changes, but with the league mechanic and expansion itself being so heavily single target focused, this quiver is going to allow bow users to easily convert their map clear abilities into boss destroying shotgunners. The quiver itself shoots shotgunnable arrows based on a projectile count that travels outwards to a specific distance and then explode after a short while. These arrows each deal about 220% base damage, so with a high investment into projectile count as well as base damage, you'll be able to deal tremendous amounts of single target damage with any bow ability in the game. One ability that we'll be seeing a lot of use with the Void Fletcher will likely be the recently nerfed Tornado Shot. The nerf hasn't been effective at all, unless the projectile speed scaling is really bad, and as a result, Tornado Shot still represents probably the best clearing ability by a landmine. The Void Fletcher, in addition to the Tornado Shot, will then shore up the single target capabilities of the build, making it possible to clear the entire endgame with ease. But of course, Tornado Shot isn't the only ability that we'll be looking towards using this specific quiver, and as a result, the demand for it will be quite high throughout the entire league. With the changes to Shaper and Elder availability, the supply for this item will also be drastically reduced, as the only way to acquire it is through the Uber Elder boss fight. It is still possible to farm it through new fragments that will be added, but whether or not this becomes profitable enough to target farm will remain to be seen. If you're intending to farm this, focus on quick maps to get as many Zana missions as possible, as she is one of the only ways to acquire the Elder or Shaper influenced maps, which can drop the new fragments. If you are able to obtain one early on, I would recommend using it to farm additional ones instead of selling it. It will very likely be your best in slot for boss killing if you're a bow user. Do keep in mind, however, that certain abilities are better at using it than others, so if your ability doesn't have a great synergy with it, feel free to sell it or switch up your build accordingly. Another one of the bow-focused uniques takes the next slot, the Death's Opus unique bow. This is a bow that has seen some moderate popularity in the previous leagues, and has always been a decent option for bow builds. However, with the changes to crafting, as well as Elder and Shaper bases, it is very likely going to be one of the staple early to mid-league bows out there. There are not a lot of unique bow options that offer a power budget similar to this one, especially with the added projectiles and its amazing synergy with the aforementioned Void Fletcher and other similar projectile synergies. To acquire this bow, you'll have to get a Death's Harp and find the prophecy called the Bowstring's Music. As such, make sure to keep your prophecies filled up as you're mapping, and make sure to seal the prophecy for selling or use it together with a bow and finish it, depending on whether you want the currency immediately or are willing to wait a bit for a tiny bit more. Outside of that, you can also try to force the prophecy to spawn through prophecy spamming, but I would not recommend this, as the Death's Opus is likely not going to be that expensive to make the time and effort worthwhile that you would have to spend to get this one particular prophecy to spawn. The next item on our list will be the Paradoxica unique sword. Similar to the bows, melee has found itself in a bit of a crisis due to the removal of the easily accessible multi-mata weaponry. While there are a few decent options for one-handed melee sword builds, it is hard to ever get around the Paradoxica choice if you intend to still play melee, as the Paradoxica is also a rather rare weapon that also heavily relies on RNG for the right mods. It is always a certain minimum rarity to it, which is represented in its usual price in every league. It is hard to really predict whether or not there will be many melee builds at all, but if there are, they will very likely be taking a close look at the Paradoxica for the early to mid-league weaponry choice. As a result, make sure to continuously do your June Betrayal missions to prime up the Mastermind, who has also had a drop table adjusted upwards, as this is the best way to guarantee Betrayal unique drops. You'll want to focus on physical damage increases for the mods, as well as attack speed, quality, and lastly crit, in that order of importance, as most melee will very likely be using physical conversion or impale based builds. The last item on our list for today is the Quill Rain Unique Bow. A name we haven't heard in a few leagues, this bow used to be an absolute staple of ranged attack builds, but has seen some rather severe nerfs a while back. 3.9 has given back some of the power that this bow provided, and as previously mentioned, has a high affinity for ranged attack builds, which might lead the Quill Rain to get closer to its old glory days. With the attack speed being buffed quite heavily, and the addition of the barrage support, there are some interesting builds that might emerge as a result of these two interacting with each other quite nicely. Things such as Explosive Arrow that do not have a limit to the scaling per arrow on the target would greatly benefit from an additional attack speed while not losing too much of their potential power. As such, we might see a lot of people pick up this bow, especially early on during the league before they acquire any stronger ones. There's no way to target farm the Quill Rain, but you try to farm the Hunter's Resolve Divination card to get a random unique bow, as many of them will likely be quite expensive this league. The Divination card drops mostly in Ramparts and Fungal Hollow Maps, which can both be found in Sector 6. Might be worth the consideration, especially if you're SSF or looking to supply your own bows. Now, moving on to the third segment for this video, the meta predictions. This one should be rather straightforward. I can see a lot of bows in our future. With the only thing really being touched this league, we'll be seeing a lot of new people try out the bow and ranged attack playstyle, in addition to the already very sizable fanbase for that style of play. Especially skills such as Explosive Arrow, Scourge Arrow, Caustic Arrow, and the new Ballista skills will likely see a huge amount of adoption early on in the league. An old favorite, Tornado Shot, has received a nerf, as mentioned previously, however it should still be absolutely fine to play. Especially with the Void Fletcher mentioned in the unique item watch list, this is also one of the strongest single target abilities in the game, while still retaining the extreme clear speeds we've seen in previous leagues. I would absolutely recommend it, if you're looking for the best overall bow ability in the game. The nerf was simply not strong enough to make any dent in this ability, in my opinion. Minions are also still fairly strong, but with the recent nerfs to zombies, they will likely not see a large adoption rate comparatively to their skeleton siblings. SRS is also still pretty decent. With this expansion and league focusing primarily on boss killing, through the Metamorph mechanics and the new Atlas bosses, it is fairly likely that there will be a lot of single target focused builds, so keep an eye on any and all strong and cheap single target options in the game for your crafting purposes. Focus on bows first, and then look around for what people are using to kill the bosses, and then craft accordingly. As for the Atlas analysis, I can't really give any advice as I haven't played the league yet, and there's not a lot of information available about the new Atlas mechanics. What we do know so far, there will be a total of 8 sectors in the new Atlas, which can all be upgraded to tier 14 to 16 maps by way of using 4 keystones in each sector. That means to upgrade every single map to the highest tier possible, you'll require 32 keystones total. There will be a few different types of keystones, which with different effects, and supposedly there'll also be a 1 unique keystone, but we don't have tons of information about this, unfortunately. Outside of the sectors and keystones, we'll also have a new Atlas objective called Citadels. These will likely be the areas where the new bosses will spawn in, which will also provide us with the new Influence base types. On the other hand, we'll be losing access to guaranteed Shaper and Influence base types, as well as their additional map density modifiers and similar bonuses they provided. My current recommendation will mirror the previous league's advice. Get to maps as soon as possible. The earlier you get there, the more currency you will be able to obtain early, the more worth it will be. With the addition of keystones, sextants will be a lot more usable by the average player, and their prices will likely reflect that change by increasing comparatively to the previous league. Furthermore, we're likely losing the ability to Shaper and Elder Strat, aka running a singular map over and over, any particular map, as the new Zana map mods are bound to map completion, and as such, unfinished maps will reduce your options, potentially below important thresholds such as the Beyond mod. If the threshold is low enough, we might still be able to force spawn specific tier 16 drops by not completing the newly revealed tier 16s in each corner of the map, and only completing the one tier 16 you want to run. And even if that is indeed possible, it would lock you into that particular tier 16 for the rest of the league, however, as there is no longer an option to seal any completed maps. So this will very likely not be the primary way for people to play the Atlas. Another thing to consider is the additional worth that was added to tier 14 plus bosses, through the added drop chances for synthesis unique maps from those tiers and higher. As a direct result, the overall Atlas strategy for this league so far seems to simply be a full completion, followed by boss chasing the newly added bosses and sextanting your favorite quadrant of the Atlas, after removing the keystones of the other areas or before obtaining them. This will depend on whether or not completed, but non-keystone maps still count towards completion and potential drop chances in the other keystone maps. I personally will be focusing on Sector 5 of the Atlas, as it offers the best layouts, div cards, and unique map combination of all the sectors in my opinion. Sector 5 is the one with city square and alleyways in it, in case you want to try that sector at the start of the league yourself. I'd advise looking at all the different sectors for a bit and seeing which one looks the best to you and your build, and then simply start farming that sector for the new bosses, until we have some more experience with it. I'm considering to make a specific Atlas strategy video once I have some experience with the actual mechanics, so like about 1 to 3 days into the league, if that is something you would desire. Let me know in the comments down below if that would be something you would like to see, if I should just cover it in next week's Chaos Report instead, like I initially planned. With the meta and Atlas analysis finished, this should be the time to have the discussion and strategy segment of the Chaos Report. However, for this prediction episode, I'll be foregoing any particular strategy discussion in favor of more rapid-fire tips and tricks for the first weeks of release. This should be a lot more valuable to players than a lengthy discussion of a random topic or strategy. I'll be returning with in-depth strategy discussions with next week's episode, of course. I will likely be discussing the new Atlas or the new bosses in that episode, but until then, feel free to give recommendations about what you would like me to talk about till next week on either the Twitter, my Discord, or down below in the comments. Now, for the last little segment, I'll be covering the Delve predictions, as well as a myriad of rapid-fire tips and tricks for the first weeks. First up, the Delve predictions, as delving will likely still be one of the best ways to make a large amount of currency in the game. Since the last league, a lot has changed in the lands of Delve, however. There have been a ton of nerfs to the fossil crafting, specifically pristine fossils as one of the poster childs of this nerf. However, this will not really change the demand for them that much, as they are still one of the only ways to weigh the RNG crafting rolls towards a specific goal. We only lost the additional stuff that these fossils gave, which, while it is definitely a loss, it's not the entire reason fossils were used to begin with. As a result, they'll still be the go-to for high-end crafting, simply due to the fact that weighing and deterministically choosing specific mods that cannot be rolled is very, very powerful. With bows and range attacks likely being on the forefront of the meta, I would predict serrated, pristine, prismatic, shuddering, and perfect fossils to be the leading fossils for this league. If that prediction is accurate, I would recommend the Frozen Hollow area first and foremost, as it covers a lot of the fossils mentioned. Secondarily, you can also farm the magma fissures for some of the other fossils. Those two areas will likely be the main farming biomes for delving in this league. Good luck with the fossil hunting. Now, getting into the tips and tricks for the first weeks. Get through the leveling process as fast as possible. This one's fairly obvious and was mentioned earlier as well. The faster you finish, the more currency you can make early, which means your currency is worth more as well, as less of it exists overall. As such, if you intend to make a large amount of currency, try to speedrun through the leveling process and get to maps ASAP. Have a strategy in mind on how to acquire currency once you get there, and stick to it. Remember that the Chaos recipe is super potent. Especially early on in the league, when Exalted Orbs are still traded for 20 to 40 Chaos, the Chaos recipe can very quickly make you multiple Exalted Orbs once you've reached maps and some easy to access delve levels. Set up your stash tabs appropriately, so the vendoring and storing of items does not slow down your farming. It is all about speed at the start of the league, if you intend to make large amounts of currency early. The Mastermind is always super worthwhile early on, and especially in 3.9. The Mastermind has seen a ton of buffs in recent leagues, and this league is no exception. The Mastermind will now drop a variety of scarabs when killed, which means not only will you be able to obtain some very popular and powerful unique items, but also gain additional currency for each kill through the scarab drops. Early on in the league, when the supply for those uniques is still low, these uniques oftentimes can go for multiple Exalted Orbs each, despite it being technically not hard to acquire them. As such, make sure to quickly and efficiently fill up your betrayal board with the right relationship setup that facilitates a quick access to the Mastermind. For the overall league, it will likely still be better not to run the Mastermind, but that remains to be seen and depends entirely on how many scarabs are dropped on death. Choose a sector of the Atlas already, and focus on it. With the Change Atlas, single map farming seems to be gone for now. As a result, make sure you properly understand each sector of the Atlas, and you choose the sector that will be the most worthwhile for you and your build, as well as your goals. Research the layouts and div cards drops of each sector, rather than an individual map, as you can no longer guarantee that you'll be able to obtain said map continuously. Early on in the league, getting to the new bosses will likely be the main focus of players, as that allows you to upgrade your atlas, as well as obtain the new orb types, influence types, and other loot related to the expansion. As such, try to focus intently on one particular sector, rather than trying to finish up the entire atlas immediately. Sextants are very easy to use now. While you're following the previous tip, make sure to use your sextants as well. They are not limited by tier anymore, meaning you can even use the white sextants on tier 16 maps. The only difference between the sextants will be the different mods that they can roll, but they will likely also retain some variety of additional monsters mods, providing an easy way to shore up the map density and increase the currency per hour you'll be able to obtain. Don't be afraid to use them now. You can't really do anything wrong here. High level Abyss will be extremely worthwhile. Not only are there a few uniques available through the Abyss that are worth their weight in Exalts, but players will also be looking towards the high eye level eye jewels and Stitch and Vices. As such, make sure that you don't run by any Abysses that you do spawn in your high tier maps, as even a singular eye level 82 plus searching eye jewel could make you multiple hundred chaos early on, with just a few alterations and regal attempts. The searching eye jewels will be by far the most expensive and sought after ones, so make sure to pick them up. The bases themselves are already going to be super expensive. Also, consider that sextants that guarantee Abyss spawns. If you get such a sextant, make sure to run your highest level map inside of that sector. You don't want to waste that opportunity. Master missions will be key this league. Even more so than last league, we'll be wanting Zana missions. With the addition of Elder and Shaper to her mechanic, getting a ton of these master missions will be highly beneficial for your overall currency per hour. As such, focus on maps with short layouts that are easy to run, even if they have a lower map density or count. Map sustain does not exist anymore, so don't worry about being able to sustain the map. You won't be able to sustain any singular map anyway. It is far more important to get through the map quickly and kill the map boss to get the master charge for a potential Elder or Shaper mission from Zana. All the other master missions are of course just as important and valuable. Aside from Alva, of course. Sorry Alva, but your temple just really sucks. Remember the problem solvers. As talked about the last two leagues, problem solvers will be an easy source of huge amounts of income early on in the league. Problem solver items are rare items with a large amount of one or two particular stats, such as intelligence or strength. Use the crafting table to add additional such stats to the item to get over certain thresholds and make them easier to be seen on the trading websites. Oftentimes it's better to double down on one stat than it is to go for a different stat with a higher value, simply because players early on are looking to just fix their build with one or two items, rather than rework their entire equipment to fit everything perfectly. This also works greatly with resistances. And with those last few tips wrapped up, I'll be ending this Chaos Report. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything or you would have wanted me to talk about anything specific that I might not have covered. If you want to support the creation of these videos, feel free to check out my Patreon and maybe consider signing up for it. You can find a link to it in the description down below. Any and all support is highly appreciated. If you also have any suggestions for Patreon rewards that you guys would like to see, please let me know on my Discord's feedback channel, down below this video in the comments, or on my Twitter. I read all of your comments. You can find a link to my Twitter and Discord down below in the description as well. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell thingamajig, like or dislike the video, and check me out over on twitch.tv/LunaWolf. I stream pretty much every day and will be live throughout the entire launch window. If you need background noise, I'll gladly be yours. You can find a link to the stream in the description down below. And with that, thanks for watching, and keep farming those exals.